in Sheehy Skeffington, and I taught plant ecology in NUI Galway until I took early retirement. And I am very interested in the Burren and its flora, and I'm lucky to live at the end of near the end of a road which has a wonderful view of the Burren from here, and we have a little bit of Burren here on the shore. And a week or so ago we had this wonderful yellow, magnificent walls of yellow from this wee plant here. The storms have slightly destroyed it, but it's called bird's foot trefoil, and it is called that because at the moment it's going to seed. It's in the pea family, so it has these pea pods, and they look like bird's feet, and you have 1, 2, 3 claws, or maybe sometimes more, and it looks just like the foot of a bird, and it's a great way of remembering it. The flower is also interesting. I find it fascinating. If you zoom in, there's little clusters of flowers, so each flower will give rise to a pod, like the bird's feet. And each flower, and the same in many of this family, has a standard, which is this big petal here, and then a horizontal group of petals. The 2 side ones are called the wing petals, and they enclose, what is also interesting, is the keel, which looks like a little boat. And heavy insects come and land horizontally on this plant. It's orientated so they land horizontally to get at the nectar. And in landing on this keel, what happens is they squeeze out the pollen, because the pollen is inside this enclosed structure. The stamens, which produce the anthers, which produce the pollen, are inside that, and they're squeezed out, and it comes out like toothpaste. So there's little doses are delivered to the underside of every bee, usually they're bumblebees, that come and land here, and then they take that pollen on their underside and they land hopefully on the same plant, the same species, and they take the pollen to another one, and the pollen is collected by the stigma, which is the female part, which sticks out from this little keel-like structure. So it's a very elaborate structure, and I find it fascinating how plants can evolve in this way in conjunction with the insects and use the insects in order to transfer their pollen.
Hello, Congela McGuire here on the upper terraces of Mullaghmore, and today we're looking at hoary rock rose, Helianthemum canum. It's growing here in profusion. It's only found in the Burren in Ireland, and in the Burren it's only found here on the top terraces in the mountain top of Mullaghmore and in Paulsnellock, and a small stand near Bell Harbour. And it grows here in profusion, more so than anywhere else in the world where it is found. It's also found in northern Spain, southern France, Italy, and up towards the Balkans and Sweden. It's growing here among a whole host of other plants. It's growing among the mountain avens, the hawksweed, the bloody crane's bill, the bird's foot trefoil, and a whole host of other plants, milkworth, etc. It has evolved in the Burren its own particular profile, having larger flowers and larger leaves. It has a beautiful lemony yellow flower with the stamens in an inverted cone standing proud in the flower. And it has lovely leaves, silver back, with dark green leaves with a main vein and silver back. It needs the sun to really shine here in the Burren, where it grows in carpets over the pavement. It is found also on the Aran Islands, but it has its own refined charm and delicacy, and that's why I really like this plant.
Well, here I am on the coast just north of Doolin. I'm looking out at a beautiful flat calm sea, and some of the Doolin ferries, obviously not operating but out doing some sea trials. I have been out looking for my favourite plant, which is Mountain Avens, but I failed to find any. Certainly I know where there's some further up in Blackhead, and I know that there will be plenty of people probably do know where there are some, but I failed to find any. I fell in love with this little flower in 1984 when I first saw it on scree slopes in the high mountains of Sutherland in Scotland. It's a true survivor, there's no doubt about it. This flat, prostrate form really suited these scree slopes. And I remember looking at some of the sites that I found it, and I thought to myself, how does this plant ever survive? How does this huge amount of flat growth, prostrate growth, which you can obviously lift in big plates, actually feed itself, get enough water, and survive in Scotland, being buried in snow for 4 or 5 months of the year? So that was a real surprise to actually find it down on the coast of Sutherland. And then to come to the Burren and find it, it was just remarkable. Having spent a career in local government in Northern Ireland, having spent a lot of time managing parks and biodiversity, coming to the Burren to live has just been it's like being transformed to heaven, because every cut and turn of the place you move is just a delight. So I've come out looking for mountain havens, failed to find any, but I've found plenty of other Burren specialities, and it's just been a delightful way to spend an afternoon. Many thanks. Bye.
Hello, my name is Sinead Keane, and I'm a botanist and a herbalist from County Clare, and I live in the Burren. This time of the year, my favourite wildflower of the Burren is the burnet rose. It's also known as Rosa pimpinellifolia in Latin. The reason why I love this flower is not just for its simple beauty, but also its sweet and uplifting scent. This year in the Burren, the flowers of the burnet rose are really lush, and the blooms are even bigger. And as you walk over the limestone pavement, the wafts of sweet, scented burnet rose drift in the air. Now, I'd like to show you this plant, and I can see it growing over here, and we'll have a look at it up close. Here we are with the beautiful burnet rose. And this is the typical habitat in which you find it throughout the limestone pavement. And if you look at the flowers, they're a simple 5-petaled, heart-shaped individual petals. And you have a coronet of anthers surrounding central styles. This flower here has beautiful pink blush through some of the gorgeous petals. The leaf, as we can see here, is made up of 7 to 10 individual leaflets, little oval-shaped leaflets, and each leaf has a toothed margin, or little teeth around the margins. It's quite a prickly plant. It has lots of thorns, the typical rose. The colour of this flower can range from milky white through to pink, and sometimes the petals have streaks of pink throughout them. So it's fabulous. In the winter time, it's the only wild Irish rose that has black hips, so it's very easy to identify it.
Hi there, I'm Ray O'Fowlu. I work for Untashka's Learning About Forest Leaf programme. The plant I've chosen today is a much underrated Irish tree, the common alder, Alnus glutinosa, or Farnog osculga. It's a member of the wider birch family, a medium-sized tree. It doesn't grow more than 20 or 25 metres and won't live much over 100 years old. a lot less if it's growing in stressful conditions. It's a deciduous tree, loses its leaves in the winter. It produces small catkins about 2 inches long in the spring. These are wind pollinated, and the female catkins go on to produce small cones. They're green initially, and as the autumn passes into winter, they dry out, turn brown, open up and release small orange seeds which are distributed through the habitat by wind or in the water courses which are typically found below alder. Alder loves wet ground. It's synonymous with damp, wet ground, riparian riverbanks, and marshy ground. That's one of the reasons I've chosen it today, not just for the tree, but for the habitat it exists often within. Sometimes the wet woodland habitat, some people know them as alder cars, and they're incredibly rich environments full of various insects and plants and mosses. Other trees found here include willow. I don't know, is there one behind me? But I have some of the more common plants that are found in or on the edges of this type of environment. Flag iris, cuckoo flower, or lady's smock, ragged robin, there's a little bit of vetch there, some willow herb, and I think there's some meadowsweet around there as well. So the reason alder is actually able to survive in these quite inhospitable, sometimes infertile environments is because of an amazing relationship it has, a symbiotic relationship with a bacteria called Frankia alni. So Frankia alni is able to sequester atmospheric nitrogen, which it exchanges with the alder tree for carbohydrates or sugar, which the tree has produced through photosynthesis. You can actually see this process in action sometimes if you peel back the grass at the base of an alder tree, you might be able to find small orange nodules or nodes. This is the bacteria where the bacteria interacts with the tree. So for this reason, alder are known as a pioneer species, and one of the early trees in ecological succession. They don't tend to survive once a woodland has established. Their seeds actually need a lot of light to germinate. There's actually an American, a close relative of this, an American alder, red alder, which is known by some in America as a glacier chaser. That's because, again, of its ability to provide its own nutrients. It's actually able to secrete carboxylite, a light acid, which is able to mine trace amounts of phosphorus from the infertile glacial till below the tree. Okay, so there are some reasons I've chosen alder. I think I have a special connection to it. When I was young, growing up in Cork, I planted a lot of alder with the local forester. They're 30 feet tall now, and anytime I go home, I make sure and visit them. I really love going down there. This is where I live in Clare, and it's very wet ground, so actually alder are one of the only trees that will grow on my land here, and these ones that I'm holding are actually seedlings from those original trees planted all those years ago in Cork. I suppose one last reason I like it, I think it's kind of an underdog of a tree. It occurs in these habitats that maybe we don't respect as much as we should. Some people would call them waste ground, these amazing habitats. So it's kind of an underdog. It doesn't have the prestige of maybe ash or oak, but it's an amazing tree nonetheless. So that's my contribution. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this fantastic series by Burren Bio. Slán agus Gurv Mahagriv.
Hi, my name is Phoebe. I'm a guide here in the Burren National Park with the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Usually this time of year we would be stationed in the information point in Corrafin, but due to unusual circumstances we're out in the park today. Lovely to be out here all on our own, but I am missing actually having some visitors to show the place to, so it's nice to have the opportunity with Burn and Bloom Online Festival to show you some of the special plants here, even if only virtually. Hopefully you'll be able to visit yourself later in the summer. So the first, we're here in the hazelwood, which is a typical Burren habitat. Great home for pine martens and squirrels. We'll have a look at some of the plants growing here today that are more shade-loving plants than your typical Burren flora. The first plant down here is wood sanicle. So the word sanicle comes from the Latin for health, and this was traditionally used in traditional medicine. Very important plant. There used to be a saying that if you had sanicle and self-heal, they were the only things you needed to heal yourself. Then on the other side of the pathway here, we have a very nice example of a bugle. This is one of the more shade-loving plants. And then up here we have some wild strawberries, not yet ripe. Moving up the path here, we've got some tormental, and just beside that a really pretty stand of tway blades. So this is Ireland's most common orchid. Gets its name from the fact that it has two blades or two leaves. Tway blade is like Old English for two leaves. Easily overlooked because of its colour. This orchid is pollinated by flies or wasps. You actually see some small flies on this one here. So they use these flowers for the nectar and they pollinate the other flowers on the plant. So that's a little look at the Hazel Woodland today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the Burren in Bloom online festival.